This is final read. We have a number of planning items. It looks like A through E. Is there anybody on the council that needs any further discussion on these items? Again, they are on final read. Anybody? All right. Immediately following those, also on final read, we have some public works items, F through J. Do we have any further questions or discussions that need to be had on those items? Seeing none at this point, Madam Clerk, let's move on to ordinances first read under 6A, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 2, relative to the Fire and Police Pension Fund.
Any questions? We've discussed this item a number of times. Seeing none? Oh, hold on just a moment. Councilman Mitchell.
Well, I'm just looking at the agenda, and on the agenda, we have an alternate version. I don't see alternate version on the agenda session.
Right. This may have been printed after that was, well, at 12:20 now. I'll make a note, and we'll confirm to make sure for this evening that it is the amended version. Thank you.
I have Mr. Robinson here if y'all have any questions at all, for the fire and police.
I believe the attorney for the fire and police, yeah, there he is. Good afternoon. Does anybody have any questions? We do have counsel for the Fire and Police Pension Fund in attendance. If anybody has any further questions on this item.
What's the difference in
No.
the alternate?
Phil, you want to tell us what the difference is between the alternate version and the original?
Sure, yeah. Come on up, Bill, if you wouldn't mind. Tell them who you are here, Mr. Robinson.
Oh, I'm Bill Robinson. I'm the attorney for the Fire and Police Pension Fund. And working with the city attorney's office, I drafted this ordinance. The ordinance, there's actually two things on the agenda for the city council tonight regarding the Fire and Police Pension Fund. The first is this ordinance, which is related to the disability retirement provisions of the pension fund. As you may be aware, we've been receiving, we have received 2 applications for disability for PTSD recently, and we see more on the horizon. As you can imagine, determining whether someone is disabled for PTSD is a different thing than determining whether someone is disabled for a physical reason. And so we started looking into how to make sure that our procedures were proper for someone who applied for a PTSD disability. And in the course of that, we looked at the disability legislation, and we determined that it is sort of spread over 3 or 4 different sections of the ordinances, and there's some redundant language and that sort of thing. So this ordinance is really designed to clean up the disability language. We've put it all in one provision. We've taken out any of the redundancies, and we've put in a little bit of information to require someone who applies for a PTSD disability to provide us with a little more information. And so, for example, if someone under our general disability provisions, if someone receives a job-related disability, that person is not entitled to go back to work as a public safety officer and continue to anywhere and continue to receive a job-related disability. For PTSD, we have provided that that a person is not entitled to work as a first responder of any kind if a person is out with PTSD. So that's the only real substantive change, I believe.
And these provisions that you've included in here, you've basically put them all into one section here in the ordinance, correct, sir?
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. It's all been moved to one section. There's no substantive change. We were asked to determine whether there would be any additional cost, for example, to the changes we've made in the disability provisions. And we've been told by our actuaries that there won't be any additional cost. Obviously, you can't tell what the cost is going to be related to disability because you don't know how many you're going to have. I can tell the council, we have seen over the course of the 19 years that I've represented the fund, we've seen an average of 2 maybe disability applications a year, and that has increased dramatically in the last couple of years. I think we've got maybe 5 or 6 pending right now. So things are changing in that regard, but we still don't see many disability applications.
The resolution also is on the agenda for the council here as item 7F here for this evening. And that actually has two different versions, I think, of the trust agreement, and that was the reason that I think there was a question.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry. The trust agreement, as you may remember, the council agreed to change the Fire and Police Pension Fund legislation to allow the board to be a board of trustees as opposed to a board of directors with a corporate trustee. It streamlined the administration of the fund to allow the board to be called and to handle the duties that they had actually been handling anyway. And the bank is now a custodian bank. So when the board was a board of directors and the bank was the trustee, we had a trust agreement with the bank. Now that the board is a board of trustees, even though a lot of their duties and rights are set out in the legislation, we believe we still need a trust agreement with the city. What it says is that the city acknowledges that any contributions it makes to the Fire and Police Pension Fund will go into a trust for the benefit of the participants and beneficiaries. And the board acknowledges that any contributions it receives from the city will be handled in a trust for the benefit of the beneficiaries and participants of the pension fund. It also provides some language regarding the duties of the board related to investing the pension fund. So that's what the trust agreement is for. The reason there are two different versions of the trust agreement is that we had talked with Daisy. The board every year provides the city with an actuarial valuation of the fund and other related financial information that the city needs to prepare its budget. And we attempt to do that in a timely fashion. We've amended the trust agreement at Daisy's request to have the trust agreement provide that the Board of Trustees will present to the city on a timely basis the annual valuation and any additional financial information agreed to by the parties each year. So that's the change to the trust agreement. Everything else in the trust agreement is the same.
Okay. So,
That's a lot of information. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to explain.
and that's the version, amended version that you have in your packet on here. It was not in there initially, and Daisy made that request, and we've added it.
Right, we wanted to go ahead and get it done, so we added it and put it in at the last minute.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Appreciate that.
Anything else, let me know. Thank you.
Yes.
Madam Clerk, looks like we have a planning item. Let's move on down to B, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38, zoning ordinance so as to rezone properties located at 405 and 407 West 47th Street, more particularly described herein from R3 residential zone to R4 special zone, subject to certain conditions.
All right. All good, Councilman? Councilman Oglesby?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I had an opportunity to speak with the applicant, and it is his intent to withdraw, so I'm just waiting to get official notification to that effect.
All right. Thank you, sir. Let's move on to C, please.
An ordinance closing and abandoning a portion of the 5900 block of Hancock Road to allow for continued development of the Chattanooga Metropolitan Airport as detailed on the attached map, subject to certain conditions.
All right. That item was covered last week. Sorry about that. I see no further questions, though, so let's move on down to resolutions. Let's go to 7F, please.
A resolution authorizing the city finance officer to execute a trust agreement relative to the Chattanooga Fire and Police Pension Fund.
Okay, I think we've covered these. That one actually has the alternate version up there. Okay. Let's go to G, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a first agreement to exercise option to renew with Diagnostic Radiology Consultants, PA, in substantially the form attached to lease 173 square feet for the X-ray examination area at the City of Chattanooga Well Advantage Center, and further authorizing the mayor to retroactively enter into a professional service agreement with Diagnostic Radiology Consultants, PA.
All right. No questions there. Let's move on to H, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Human Resource Officer to enter into a contract with Collins and Company, Inc. to provide third-party administrative services for the city's job injury program for a one-year term, plus 2 additional one-year renewal options at the rate of $6,800 per month, including payment of the city's job injury claims, for an annual total amount not to exceed $3 million.
All right, aye, please.
A resolution authorizing Chattanooga-Hamilton County Regional Planning Agency to develop recommendation for an ordinance and other zoning tools that would provide development standards that address development activity in environmentally sensitive areas, such as steep hillsides and floodplains.
See no questions. Let's move on to, let's see. These public works items were also covered last week, correct, Councilman? Do we have any questions about J through P? These were covered in committee last week. If not, Madam Clerk, let's move on down to Q, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Youth and Family Development to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Hamilton County Board of Education for youth and family development and human resources collaboration training services related to work-based learning at the Howard School.
All right, let's go ahead and read R2, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Youth and Family Development to enter into an interlocal lease agreement with Hamilton County Board of Education to use South Chattanooga YFD Center for 3 years for the Howard School Transition Academy classes.
Councilman Mitchell.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
I'm sorry about this, but I'm going back to 7G,
Okay.
and I guess I need to ask Beverly, how was this group chosen? It's DRC. I'm sorry. DRC.
Okay. On this one, this was a part of a request for quote that we went out for and asked for all available services to be quoted and bidded, and this was the awarded company. This is for a lease agreement portion of that.
Okay, I'm just looking, I mean, I gotta look at it again. Does this have a time limit on it, or
It's 1 year.
1 year? Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You good? All right, thanks, Beverly.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, and we do not have a departmental report, therefore, we will adjourn our regular session and move into economic and community development at this time. Chairman Burke.
Motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm learning. Welcome to Economic and Community Development Committee meeting. It's my understanding that we have read all of these items into the record already. Do we have any questions? Is there anything anyone would like to go over? No. I do have one on the item B. Ms. Donna, could I ask you a question about that?
Hello, council.
Hello, ma'am. Under B, is it the understanding that with this right here, if we do not, the rugby team, we have to sign some type of lease agreement at this point, or have to move something in order for them to have the 3 months? They have to have in some type of understanding with the
Correct.
city that they can operate?
Yes, sir. So the city has to enter into lease agreements with terms for anyone that is using city property.
Gotcha.
And this lease does that. The rugby team had a contract that expired in September of 2017. And they have asked that we allow them to use the field until the end of their season. And this resolution would allow for us
Allow them to do that.
enter in a lease to do that. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Just wanted to clear that up to have that understanding.
Yes.
And now I see that we have a homelessness plan presentation.
And I think Tyler would like to request that we do that after the Patton Tower pilot. I think they're waiting for someone to.
If that's
to join
okay with
us.
the council, we could do that next. All right, let's go. Thank you, ma'am. We'll go
All
with the Patton Towers pilot financials first.
Okay, awesome. And we have John Shepard back this week, and he has distributed, as of last Tuesday, the information that was requested by council, and he's here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Sir?
Thank you.
All right. I guess we can do a brief overview of the information that you sent to us, if you would like to explain that, and then if we have any questions after that, we'll go from there.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
All right, thank you.
So again, I'm John Shepard with Elmington. Thanks for this opportunity to come back. So the information I sent you is basically financial projections for the proposed renovation and the requested pilot. So it shows the number of units in the building, the payment standard with HUD. So that's not what the tenants are paying. That's the total combined what the tenants are paying and HUD is reimbursing. Just a reminder that the tenants only pay 30% of their income. As well as projections about the costs of the renovation, and then the 25-year operating pro forma, both with and without a pilot. The without version, the purpose of that is really just to illustrate that the project is infeasible without the pilot, which I mentioned before, and then the version showing under the pilot lays out projections for the pilot payment amounts, operating expenses, and debt service, and all of that.
Thank you, sir. Awesome. Seeing no questions, okay, hold on one second. Jerry Mitchell, Councilman Mitchell.
Go ahead.
Gilbert's first.
Go ahead.
Okay, Councilman Gilbert.
I just have a question. This 25-year pilot, correct?
Yes, sir.
And people that currently are there.
Hit your button again.
Did it on purpose,
There we
Bird.
go.
You did it on purpose, didn't you?
Thank you.
The people that's currently there will have an option of staying there if they want to stay there for 25 years. They can, correct?
Yes, sir, that's right. So the affordability restrictions will actually exceed the length of the pilot term. Under the THDA affordability requirements that attach to the tax credits that we're using, the affordability period is actually 30 years, so it exceeds the term of the pilot by another 5. But yes, the tenants who are currently there will have the opportunity to remain, and for as long as they do so in good standing.
So if any person, if say apartment come available, they will be going into the same principle of the cost of low income, correct? If it's a new tenant.
Yes, so a new tenant would have to qualify. We would do an income eligibility determination to make sure that their incomes were under 60% of the area median income, and then they also have to qualify under the HUD requirements as either elderly or disabled.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Help clear something up for me. You said the tax credits you were using, I was under the impression you were applying for those tax credits.
Yes, sir, that's right. So we have not applied for the tax credits yet. The state administers the federal housing tax credit on an annual basis that starts at January 1. So we'll submit that application as soon as they start accepting them in January. But the nature of the restrictions that will attach to those credits, we know in advance.
Right. Ms. Williams, could you come up here, please? Let's say they're
Yes, sir.
not successful in getting these tax credits, but we've signed a pilot. Is there any clause in there that has gives us the ability to renegotiate the pilot if they don't get their tax credits?
That's a question for our city attorney, but we're prayerful that they will get the
Well,
tax
yeah,
credits.
I am
Because if they don't get the tax credits, they don't need a pilot. That the project is not feasible without all those layers of the capital stack. And the types of credits that they're applying for aren't the super competitive credits. So the chances are very good if this project would get funded.
Okay, so are we like not signing the pilot agreement until we see them get the tax credits, or are we signing a pilot agreement and before they get the tax credits? I mean, I'm asking how
Sure.
this works. Do they have to have the pilot in place to get the tax credits?
Yes, THDA requires, I think that's the right verb, requires that if you are applying for the tax credit and you say you're going to get a pilot, that you have a pilot.
Okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
right. So I'll go back to my original question. If they don't get the tax credits, can we get out of the pilot?
I will let John speak to that, but the answer is yes. But again, if they don't receive the tax credits, the entire project's in jeopardy. So every layer of their financing is needed in order for the project to move forward. But I'll let Mr. Shepherd speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely, she's correct. We can't, if we don't get the tax credits, there is no project, so it doesn't matter if there's a pilot. But I think, and I would defer to the city attorney on this, but the pilot agreement, I don't think needs to be signed until the tax credits have been awarded by the state. The resolution will be voted upon tonight, but the agreement itself doesn't necessarily have to be entered into until after the award of the credits. Is that your understanding?
No, and actually, there will be a lease agreement that will be involved because the property has to be conveyed to the Health, Education, Housing Facilities Board. That lease agreement will occur during the length of the pilot as well as security for us. And if there's a failure to comply with the terms of the pilot agreement, then we would no longer, we could pull back from that because we've got that language in the document here for a clawback type language.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so we have clawback language.
Yes, sir.
And personally, I believe this is a great project, so I'm not asking these questions to be a pain or anything, but I just legally would like to know, they've exceeded what they have to do with what they're trying to do. If they don't get the tax credits, do they have the ability, I know Ms. Williams said the project dies. I think, I'm not sure it does die, that's why I'm asking these questions. And that's why I'm asking the questions of what are our options? What triggers in this particular agreement the clawback?
If they have defaulted on providing those services, which includes building this structure, having it outfitted within a specific time frame, construction being completed within that time frame, that's one issue. And then likewise, the term for the term of the pilot in this case would only go because they have actually constructed that and are providing those low and moderate income services that they're supposed to do.
Okay, and let's say they've spent the money to build it, and now all of a sudden it's not for low-income people anymore.
Correct.
Is that a clawback?
It would be a clawback purpose, yes.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, seeing no more questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us to our next item, the homelessness plan presentation. Mr. Tyler?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you'll recall, back in July, we presented a resolution to you about hiring a consultant to do our homelessness action plan. And at that time, we talked about coming back to present to y'all the results of that plan. And so we have a first draft, and we've vetted it through the Interagency Council on Homelessness. And today, our consultants from Analytic Insight, Amy Flowers and Leslie Ogilvie, are in town. I'll just say real briefly that to get to this point, we had our Interagency Council on Homelessness Planning Committee, which basically selected our vendor along with our purchasing department. And we're really involved, meeting every 2 weeks to oversee this plan. We've got a couple members from the planning committee today, Lisa Martignano is here, and Donna Maddox, one of our co-chairs for the Interagency Council on Homelessness, is here today. And so at this point, I'll call up Amy and Leslie to take it from here.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for the opportunity to do this work and to present the plan to you this afternoon. I'm Amy Flowers. I'm president of Analytic Insight.
And I'm Leslie Ogilvie, Senior Research Associate at Analytic Insight. And just out of curiosity, how do we get through the... Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. Make sure we get there. So first, we'd like to give you an idea of what we'll be speaking about today. We'll take you a little bit through the strategic planning process, the challenges and recommendations that we found as far as coordination among the various service providers and community organizations that work to address homelessness, as well as the specific actions in the 2018 homelessness plan. And then we'll take any questions at the end. So first, we'd just like to talk a little bit about the strategic planning process and what brought us to this point. So at the beginning of the project, we conducted about 30 key informant interviews with service providers, community organizations, city leaders, and other advocates that work to address homelessness. We also interviewed people experiencing homelessness here in the Chattanooga community. We reviewed secondary data sources and conducted an organizational network analysis, which is detailed in the planning document. We conducted 9 stakeholder focus group planning sessions where the actions that we'll be talking about a little bit further on were really identified and discussed. We held a public community input meeting where those actions were prioritized. And now we're in the reporting and destination period. One thing we found from the key informant interviews was that the majority of the community wants to see a centralized vision statement. So we took a first attempt at this, which is Chattanoogans envision a future where no person experiences homelessness in the Chattanooga community.
We heard quite a bit during the stakeholder interviews and focus groups about coordination between organizations to provide comprehensive services. In particular, some of the coordination barriers that we heard included a decentralized vision and goals, where each organization has its own vision and its own goals. There is the potential for overlap and also for gaps in services that are needed. Competition over funding was also an issue that we heard quite a bit about. Sometimes funders will offer funding with the goal and the objective of having organizations collaborate with each other as a team, and that's what they're looking for. Instead, if organizations are competing against each other for that funding, then they all lose in the competition. If they can coordinate their activities and team together, they'll have a better chance of winning funding opportunities. There's also limited data sharing, and we heard about the importance of organizations knowing what the other organizations are doing in their area so that they can coordinate activities. And lastly, some past leadership challenges pose problems for people as they look forward to plan activities in the future. Some of the recommendations that we heard to improve coordination included that the community really needs a shared vision and a goal to work toward together. And then each organization can develop a mission statement that describes their position and their role in working toward that common goal. Currently, the Chattanooga Interagency Council serves as the lead organization in our plan activities, and around 2020, we anticipate that another organization will come in, take over those activities, and move towards sustainability.
So next we want to talk a little bit about the 2018 homelessness plan. So before we talk about the specific items, we wanted to give you some context about how the plan is organized. So in the plan document, you'll find a logic model that we developed showing the flow from homelessness into housing. So the actions are organized into 4 broad categories that include identifying people experiencing homelessness, providing emergency and temporary shelter, placement into permanent housing, and then ensuring housing stability and homelessness prevention.
Identifying people experiencing homelessness is really the first step. And it's not just for service providers, but also for teachers, police officers, other people in the community who are in a position to identify someone who's at risk of homelessness or is experiencing homelessness. And the standardized assessment and referral process is really about creating a coordinated, systematic process so that whoever someone encounters who identifies them as being at risk of homelessness or being homeless, whoever that person is, it's the same process that they go through. Expanded outreach worker capacity is also on our list of recommendations. And outreach workers help someone with the paperwork to apply for housing, getting transportation for appointments to review available housing, and helps get them placed into permanent housing. Homeless Healthcare currently has several of these outreach workers, but their capacity to expand is limited. And so the first step is really to determine the number of workers that are needed, and then to fill those positions. And people who are formerly homeless themselves are really ideal candidates for that.
Establishing and maintaining a database of available housing units is also a recommendation in our plan. And this centralized database would provide service providers with a tool to locate permanent housing options for people experiencing homelessness. So this database should include information on vacant units, the type of housing that it is, any entry requirements into the housing unit, as well as the location of that unit in relation to other services like transportation, childcare, or healthcare. It should also include cost information, such as the security deposit information or the monthly rental rates. We also talk about establishing and maintaining a database of resources, and many communities offer a resource guide to their residents of services that are available in the community. So this database should have information about the services that are provided by the organizations in the community, as well as their contact information.
Many of the providers talked about the need for something like a one-stop shop, a single location that people could go to get information about all the services that are needed. The problem with that is that most neighborhoods do not want such a facility in their area. So there tends to be quite a bit of pushback on where to place such a facility. The solution that was proposed was a mobile services van, so that rather than having a static location in a building, a van would be able to go out to contact people where they are, whether that's under an abandoned building, in a tent city, under a bridge. The mobile services van would be able to go throughout the community and offer services where people are. And that way, people who are experiencing homelessness would also not have to arrange transportation to get to a particular location. Our plan provides some information about a case study from Seattle, Washington, where they very successfully used a mobile van to offer health services to people experiencing homelessness. And they found that by offering preventive services and basic health care through this mobile van, that they've been able to reduce emergency room utilization and has more than covered the cost of the van.
A Clean and Safe Ambassador program could be started in partnership with local businesses in Chattanooga. And currently, River City Company is spearheading an effort to establish a business improvement district in downtown Chattanooga, which would provide a way to fund and operate the Clean and Safe Ambassador program. So Clean and Safe Ambassadors really serve as the eyes and ears of the downtown area. They help to eliminate litter or graffiti, keep alleyways and sidewalks clear, and really enhance the aesthetic quality of downtown. They also can serve as public safety escorts, or help to disrupt any public disturbances. And as far as homelessness, they can provide homeless outreach services and help identify people experiencing homelessness and link them to the available services that they need. We also want to talk about emergency and temporary shelter, and this really provides the immediate need of shelter and a safe place to sleep at night. So our plan offers 2 strategies to enhance emergency and temporary shelter in Chattanooga. The first is to reestablish a hotel voucher program that several organizations used in the past to help provide emergency and temporary shelter to families experiencing homelessness. So our plan recommends reestablishing this program and extending that out to all individuals that experience homelessness. And this option is really in place until our next item, establishing a low barrier emergency shelter, is established in Chattanooga. So this is really the long-term goal, is to provide a low demand emergency shelter that would replace that hotel voucher program. Currently, there are several organizations in Chattanooga that provide overnight shelter, but they usually require sobriety or participation in religious services and are often at capacity. So this really leaves a lot of people experiencing homelessness unsheltered overnight and sleeping in places that are not fit for human habitation. So this provides safety and health concerns for a lot of those people in the community. So a low demand shelter would welcome all people experiencing homelessness and would help link them to the needed services and housing options while also providing them a clean and safe place to stay.
Our plan really follows the housing first model, which is really the primary goal is placement in permanent housing. And once placement in permanent housing becomes a possibility, then the tone around emergency shelter tends to change, because you know that the emergency shelter would only be for a few days or a few weeks until permanent housing is found. Housing navigators are an important part of establishing permanent housing. They're the main point of contact for a person as they navigate the housing process, employment services, drug and alcohol services, Social Security, and other benefit programs. Once the housing navigator helps to establish a place of permanent housing for someone, intensive case management and service coordination becomes very important to make sure that they can stay there and that that's a sustainable solution. And many organizations currently provide case management services here in Chattanooga, so our plan really involves strengthening those services and enhancing them.
We also recommend establishing a flexible community fund. And this fund would provide a tool for service providers to use to provide some financial assistance to people experiencing homelessness for a variety of things, such as back rent, utilities, moving costs, security deposits, or short-term rental assistance. So the fund should be flexible enough to meet the individual needs of the person experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk of homelessness. And often a small amount of financial assistance can usually stabilize a person's housing crisis and return them to stable housing quickly. We also recommend increasing the scattered site capacity across the community for both permanent supportive housing options and rapid rehousing options. So this will require landlord outreach to find available units, as well as a housing needs assessment to look at the current housing inventory here in Chattanooga. This assessment could also be used to look at any specific buildings that could be rehabilitated or refurbished to provide permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing units for people experiencing homelessness. Our next section is housing stability and homelessness prevention. And our first item here focuses on aligning funding opportunities to expand supportive housing capacity in Chattanooga. So we'd like to talk about the Hamilton County Fuse project, which is a great example of aligning funding because it aims to combine federal, local, private, as well as Medicaid and healthcare dollars all together to fund this program. So the FUSE program is led by the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, and the goal is to target frequent users of the jails, hospitals, and the homelessness system, and also the people that have severe and persistent mental illness, and place them into supportive housing that has intensive wraparound services available. The county's been working on this for about the past 2 years, and they hope to begin implementation activities this year. The pilot project would serve about 50 individuals, and the city is a partner on that project as well. Another area that we looked at was expanding affordable housing. So the city plans to use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the pilot program, and federal funds together to offer various affordable housing incentives for developers here in Chattanooga.
And our last item is expanding job fairs. Community Kitchen currently offers job fairs for people who have arrest records or felony convictions, so that employers can come to the job fair knowing that they are willing to hire someone with that kind of a background, and people who come to the fair to find jobs understand that that's going to be acceptable to the employers that they meet there. So expanding those kinds of job fairs to specialty populations who are in need of work would be very useful. And at the same time, SOAR applications can be offered at the job fair to ensure that people are connected with Social Security, disability, and other benefits that will help them. Our implementation timeline really begins with some of the projects that require staff, so that it builds the foundation that's needed in order to go into the subsequent year's projects. And it should be noted that the costs do not include the current funding levels that already exist and that can be reallocated, streamlined, or better coordinated across providers to be used more effectively. So our costs are comprehensive that include the expenditures currently being made by organizations in Chattanooga. So thank you again for the opportunity to present the plan. I believe Tyler would like to speak to some of the next steps.
So just a sense of what's next for this plan. We hope to have a final draft published this Friday as a deadline. If you have feedback, we're welcome to accept your feedback and incorporate it into this draft of the plan before the final version is released. We also hope to start implementation in 2019, and we've started a couple of things already. One is that we've heard this need for expanded outreach capacity over the past couple of years as our Veterans Project has shifted towards looking at homelessness overall. And so we have several outreach workers, part-time outreach workers that were budgeted in last year's budget that are coming on board, and they're here now and they're getting trained. And so we'll have some expanded outreach capacity to go ahead and test this and kind of build a system for what this looks like. And then some of the things that we don't need to go out and find funds for, but we know that we can implement right away, like the resource guide and the standardized referral and assessment process. We're going to go ahead and start working groups through the Interagency Council on Homelessness to start coming up with plans for those specific recommendations. Speaking of which, the Interagency Council on Homelessness, we're going to work with Donna and Betsy, the co-chairs, to put together some groups to work on some of these items. Sam and I will continue to staff the Interagency Council on Homelessness this year. We're also looking at, as was mentioned from the recommendation, at looking at who, if there is a new organization or an existing organization that can take on this new kind of community role that the Interagency Council is doing right now, of regularly updating our homelessness action plan and building kind of larger project development for these cross-collaborative projects that take multiple stakeholders from different fields. Last is a couple of things. So Sam is going to be hosting an information meeting for the community on January 10th. That's 5:30 at the Highland Park Neighborhood Association building, the old one on Duncan Avenue. This is going to be a session where it's open to the public. Sam's going to do a brief training on what to do if you encounter somebody who is homeless and how to engage with them and get them help. And we'll also be kind of presenting parts of this plan so people can better understand the plan if they're interested in getting involved. And last but not least, some of these items that have price tags on them, we're looking at the current budget cycle, next year's budget in the city, seeing which of those items the city's going to contribute towards. And then we're talking with foundations and private funders about some of the other things. And so we're going to have to basically look at federal funds, local funds from local government, and private funds that are all going towards homelessness and figure out how we realign those funds. And probably we'll have to do some additional fundraising to get some of these needs and recommendations met. And so we'll come up with a funding and finance plan that'll better detail that out and where those sources of funding are coming from. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or comments y'all might have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Councilman Gilbert.
I have two questions. On the ambassador program, is it just for downtown, or is it's for all of Chattanooga for the ambassador program?
It can be for whatever area that we want. We were looking at this specifically for downtown because when we had a group planning session with businesses, they said that was the area of greatest need for this type of program. And so they talked about perhaps incorporating it into the business improvement district or something like that, because they're interested in funding some type of program like this that would meet their immediate need of engaging with a homeless person and getting connected to services while they conduct business.
The next question is, this presentation that you're giving, if you have a potential group that wants the same presentation, who do they contact?
Yeah, they can contact me in the mayor's office. We'll be happy to come by and talk to them.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Jerry Mitchell.
No.
Oh, I apologize. Chip Henderson.
Hey, Tyler, so once we identify the individuals that are homeless, will we do the risk assessment to decide, like when we start housing them, what order they go in, or in other words, how will it be decided who gets first, second, third slot, so on?
Yes, and so the same process we went through with the Veterans Homelessness Task Force, we're going to do similar for this plan, and a lot of the components came out of successful things we saw from that. So I will mention that Chattanooga Regional Homeless Coalition has already started this process for the chronic homeless population over the past year.
The risk assessment, or?
The risk assessment and building the by name list of people. And so they've already started that, and they have a pretty big list built already of folks, and they've already been assessed, and they're sitting there. The biggest problem that they have is we don't have enough case managers and housing programs to refer them to. And so that's where these staffing recommendations come in, to have some more capacity to get those folks off of that list and placed into housing.
When do we think we'll start in earnest actually placing people or individuals into?
Yeah,
permanent?
I think what we're looking at is probably late 2019, once we're able to get some of the funds raised and get some of the staff on board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Donna and Betsy and your group, thank you very much. It's something, obviously, Chattanooga's been dealing with and trying to figure out for so many years. So thank you for your effort. The question I have is, when you see implementation 2022 on the shelter, does that mean that's when we will begin to build a shelter, or that's when we will actually have a shelter?
According to the plan, that's our goal for actually having a shelter built.
Okay,
And
so
so this is a long-term project, and we'll probably have to start the planning process for that now. And so over the next 4 years, we'll see lots of development, fundraising, and things like that to actually get the shelter built. the plan goal is to have that online by I think it's May 2022.
So did you all just think from the resource standpoint, we wouldn't it'd take that long to gather enough resources to build the shelter? Or, I mean, is that why we're waiting so long? I mean,
I'll let
we've
Amy
been.
and Leslie, who made the recommendation, speak a little bit
Okay.
more towards the timeline, yeah.
I mean, we've been wanting a shelter since about 2010,
Right.
maybe sooner.
So we tried to be conservative in our estimates, especially for the higher dollar items, knowing that some fundraising and other private funds would need to be identified. Some federal funding might be available, but that takes a lot of coordination and, putting in proposals and things like that. So we wanted to build in enough time to look at the various funding resources that are available, do the necessary fundraising, as well as find a location. There's many steps involved with finding a shelter and establishing that, so we wanted to make sure there was adequate time built in. Obviously, if it can be done a lot quicker, that's encouraged and would be beneficial to everybody in the community.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Oglesby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Has an individual or an organization been designated to lead this effort?
Yes. So right now it's the city. And we, through Sam and me, we're staffing the Interagency Council on Homelessness. The Interagency Council on Homelessness was established basically to form this plan and to oversee the implementation. And so we're working with Donna and Betsy on forming formal bylaws for that group, having a formal decision-making structure and things like that for that group that will continue to see the implementation. And based off of Amy and Leslie's kind of analysis and recommendation, they're saying that we should spend this year trying to find another organization to staff and basically manage the Interagency Council on Homelessness in that process. We've had a couple of organizations that have expressed interest in doing that, but we have to talk more as a group, a collaborative group, about what that looks like and who's best to spearhead that.
So in that year, who's going to be leading to make sure that those things happen in the timeline recommended? I'm looking, okay, I know you got this group, but as everybody knows, I just like to know one person or one organization that if I need information or somebody needs information out in the community that want to help, want to give funds, who is that individual?
Me.
As of right, okay. I just wanted to hear that so we know
Yeah.
it's you that we call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Tyler, I have a couple of questions. When I was listening, it's a lot of times it's like a plan and an idea that's still coming to fruition, it's still trying to get legs up under it. And it's hard to understand that if the homeless people in our community don't want to buy into this, or the programs that are not buying into this, the community is still left kind of in the air like we're throwing money at something with no accountability. Because still, the organizations and the people, my program is better than Councilman Chips. Councilman Chips' program is better than mine. So for us, and with limited funding, and for us to cross those lines and say we're going to work together with that limited funding, whose program is going to outshine who's going to get the most funding, what am I going to do? It still seems to me that those things or that buy-in is not there. It seems like it's an idea that, hey, this is some things that we would like to do, and a lot of them I think we kind of already have understood that these things are going on in our community. And when she was speaking of the mobile bus to go to where they are, we walked down the street to 10th and 11th Street, there they are. I saw them getting a lot of homeless community people getting fed this morning. And I just still don't understand what incentives or what are we doing, or how do we get the homeless community to make sure that they buy in to what we're doing if they don't want to buy in. If I want to stay homeless, several guys and young ladies that I talked to told me that I had a problem because I go punch a clock every day because I have to work and I have to be somewhere and pay these bills. They don't want to have to do that. Then you have the organizations that say, hey, my program is working, that one is not. how do we create that line of communication where everyone comes together?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, for people experiencing homelessness and them having buy-in, we tried to involve them in the planning process. And so through outreach workers and other folks, Amy and Leslie actually did interviews with different populations of people, so families, individuals, veterans, and things like that, to get their thoughts and feedback on where they go for services, what's lacking in the services that they go to. It's obviously kind of a focus group. It's not the whole population. But I will say our experience in working with veterans is that when we're able to make the housing real for people and we actually have a key and a lease and they're ready to move in, then the conversation kind of changes and that folks want to take us up on that. And when they see other folks in the homeless community that are getting housing and turning their lives around, that they want part of that. And so that's just our experience from doing the work here for 3 years now, is that we saw people turn around once we were having a lot of success in getting people into housing. And so I anticipate that will happen. There's obviously going to be some folks that are more difficult than others, but that's where some of this intensive case management and outreach really helps. The outreach workers do a really good job of building relationships and rapport with people experiencing homelessness. Sam did it for 3 years, and the main goal is just to build the relationship and the trust so that they'll take our offer up on services. And we find that for people who have good outreach regularly, that happens. And then for people coming together and organizations coming together, that's what the Interagency Council on Homelessness was built to do, because we had the Homeless Coalition that's doing some of that work, but we wanted to bring people from outside the service provider community to the table too, that have an interest in it, like city agencies, police department, the county, hospitals, health insurance companies, and some of the non-traditional partners. And so this basically provides a collaborative group and a venue to work on some of these bigger projects that might take one agency, they might take 5 agencies to pull off. And that's kind of what we feel we've been lacking, is that cross-sector collaboration in this space.
And thank you. I think so as well. And glad to have a front row seat to see how it works out. Thank you. Anyone else? No? All right. No more questions. Thank you, Ty. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Ms. Donna?
Councilman Mitchell, I want to give you a more concrete answer to your question, because sometimes when we talk to the attorneys and people like me and John, sometimes the answer is not very clear. Our pilot program states that if the property is not transferred within, I think it's a 1-year period, then the applicant pays a fee for that 1 year, and then they have an additional year. And the pilot is not enforced until, as Phil was referencing, the property is transferred to the Health and Ed Board. So with the renovations, you guys have approved 3 projects that were actually existing projects that were being purchased and renovated. One of the most recent one was Ridgeway Apartments, and then this one being Patton Towers. The first one you approved, that project's not moving forward. But there is no abatement of taxes until and unless that property is transferred to the HEB, and the applicants have a year to get that done. So if they don't get the appropriate financing, they don't have a pilot. Am I answering your question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, seeing that we have no more questions, motion to adjourn to 6. Thank you.
Yes, sir.